You're listening to episode 306.
Welcome to Transforming Missions Podcast, providing you with insights and resources you need to lead a movement of Jesus followers.
So welcome, and Tim, today we're going to explore ChatGPT and ways to use it in ministry.
Yeah, I've used it a few times, and it's been really interesting, fun, challenging, and funny.
So can we start with a few reminders about ChatGPT before we dive in?
Sure, let's do it.
And let me say first, if you didn't listen to episode 305 and it's a little bit longer, please listen to it. We talk about what AI is and how it's already being used, as well as some concerns that have come up.
Okay, so the thing I've learned about using ChatGPT is that it's only going to be as good as the information that I've given it, or if you're using it, what you've given it. So if I ask it to help me brainstorm about topics on discipleship, it's going to give me a general list. If I tell it I need it to be a United Methodist pastor with 50 years experience, I get something different. Is that the way it's supposed to work?
Yes. And I asked it a coaching question, and it was very generic. And then I asked it to give me information in the ICF core competencies, and it was much more helpful. The other thing that I would offer in that is it remembers your last 100 pages. So unless you tell it to disregard all other information, it's going to pull from what you have said to it before. Now, here's what I haven't been able to figure out. I don't know what a page is in ChatGPT. I don't know if that's a screen page. I don't know if that's each query that you do. Now, before we go any farther, Tim, maybe we should just point out that to get to ChatGPT and what we're talking about, you can go to chat.openai.com, and we'll put that link in the show notes. So it's a website that you can get to on any of your browsers. It's also an app that you can download on your phone or your iPad or whatever.
Yep. That's the way I use it. It's on my phone. Maybe another reminder, if you're going to use ChatGPT, another reminder is to be specific about tone and length. Let's do this. If you want it to be encouraging, friendly, academic, if it's verbose, you got to tell it to shorten it. One of the things I've learned is you can't hurt its feelings.
Right. Right. It will apologize to you before. If you say, no, I meant this, it will say, I'm sorry.
And if you thank it, it will say, you're welcome, and come back when you need some more.
and it's funny that you should say that, Tim. I have just gotten in the practice of saying please and thank you, and like I'm talking to a human, because I think the danger for me that I see that if I'm just telling a machine what to do, that might unintentionally bleed into the people that I interact with and become become a rut in my brain. You know what I mean? The way that the paths get formed in our brains, that becomes a habit of the way that I speak or I write, and I don't want to do that. So I do use please and thank you.
So that goes back to our last episode in talking about being healthy, using boundaries, because even though it is technology, it's good technology. I mean, it's technology that picks up on what you say and how you say it or write.
Yeah. So should we do a real-time example?
That's what I was getting ready to say. Why don't we do a real-time example?
And here's why we're going to do this. Because our results, my results and Tim's results, will differ because of the way that we've been using it. So here's what we're both going to type in. And this is where a video might be a better option for this format. So we'll just describe it as best we can. I've typed in, I'm working on a sermon series on discipleship. Can you suggest 7 to 10 topics for a United Methodist Church in Columbus, Ohio? Now, I don't know that Columbus, Ohio is an important part of that. That was just what I ended up putting in. And Tim's doing something similar. And for me, it came up with the first response was creating a sermon series on discipleship for a United Methodist Church in Columbus, Ohio sounds like a wonderful endeavor. Given your focus on grace and a missional approach to leadership in the church, here are 10 suggested topics that might resonate with your congregation. That line there is communicating, it is remembering previous things that I have put in to ChatGPT, because I have been putting Tim's blogs in, I've been putting our podcast conversations in to both summarize and make sure that we're making the point that we really want to make, and to help me with some of the things that we're going to talk about today in terms of ways that you might want to use ChatGPT. So my first suggestion is understanding grace and discipleship. Explore the Methodist understanding of grace, including prevenient, justifying, and sanctifying grace, and how it shapes the journey of discipleship. What's your first one, Tim?
Well, Sarah, I put the same thing in you put in. I'm working on a sermon series on discipleship. And could you suggest 7 to 10 topics for United Methodist Church in Columbus, Ohio? It didn't tell me I was doing a wonderful endeavor.
It likes me more.
But the first one it gave to me was the call to follow, responding to Christ's invitation.
Yeah, and so it's not going to provide the same information from 2 different inputs. And even if I went back and did the same prompt again, it's not going to generate the same thing twice for me, even though it's still using, because I think what it does is it thinks if I ask it the same question again, I didn't like what it gave me the first time.
So one of the things that I think is interesting about it, and I think it's a very good thing about it, is that it's not drawing from a database that's going to give you give everybody exactly the same thing.
Right.
And you've said it, we can't say it enough, and that is, it can only draw from what you've put into it.
Right.
So
it does draw from, so for example, the ICF core competencies, you don't care what the ICF core competencies are, but I did not have to explain to it what the ICF core competencies were. It understood that. That was part of what I was testing. Did it understand that? Part of what I think it does know is what a United Methodist is. And so because it understands what a United Methodist is, there are certain things that it does say to us, and then it's enhanced by what we have offered to it. Does that make sense?
Yes. You said that much better than what I was trying to say, because that's exactly how this technology can be helpful.
Yeah. So I said this once, I'll say it again. It has our last 100 pages, and most of what we have shared on Transforming Mission is about discipleship and leadership. And so it has a lot of input from us. So that's part of why I'm going to get different things than Tim has had. Now, he may have put in some of the same things that I put in, and so there may be some overlap at some point.
Sarah, just a bit of my facetiousness and humor. I like my list better than yours.
And why do you like your list better than mine?
Because it sounds more like me.
And that's part of the use of it. It will learn what you sound like, and it will learn what you put in. A silly example is if you put in, let's say you're preaching on the book of Revelation. So you ask it to summarize 5 sermons on Revelation. And then you ask it a question about discipleship,
you're going to get a different
different output. So be mindful about what you are feeding it and what you are putting in as input, because it's going to generate output partially based on what you give it.
So can I be really crude for a moment? Garbage in, garbage out.
Yes.
Now, it's not saying that Revelation's garbage. Please, I didn't say that. But what I am saying is you need to do the work and utilize AI to help become more efficient. It's not a replacement for doing the work, but it can help you. It is an assistant to your work, but it's not going to replace your work.
Right. So one of the things that came up on my list of discipleship was living a missional life. And so I took that one topic and I asked it to expand on the topic of living a missional life. And now, come on, it doesn't know this. This is because we have said things like this and we believe things like this. It says, living a missional life in the context of a United Methodist congregation involves exploring how the concept of mission can be integrated into everyday life, reflecting the grace-centered theology and community-focused approach of the denomination. You have heard us say things like that, and it's been in the past 3 to 4 months. So here are some key things to consider. Understanding missional living, and then it gives a definition and a biblical basis. And this is where I have found that sometimes it will hallucinate. And what I mean by hallucinate is it gives you garbage. Don't believe all the scriptures that it pulls, that the references are connected to what you are talking about. Sometimes it's not accurate.
But one of the things that is just really amazing about it, because it's a scripture text that you use, is that it did pull out the Matthew 5 scripture where you're the light in the world.
Right. And guess what? We've
Being
used that.
light.
So here are a few additional reminders about ChatGPT, and then we'll get to the ways that you can use it.
Yeah, don't be afraid to offer feedback. You got to tell it what idea to focus on. I mean, so you're having, it's kind of like having a conversation with somebody that's not going to get angry with you. That I didn't want that. This is what I want.
Right. And if it's not giving you the information or understanding what you're speaking about, ask it to describe to you what you think you are asking of it. And then you might need to say it in a different way. We've already said this, but I'll say it again because I don't think it can be said enough. Use discernment. If it hallucinates, try again. If it gives you bad information, consider the information that you gave it and how specific you were in the question that you asked it.
And again, if you didn't get exactly what you were looking for, you can ask it to expand on the idea.
Yeah, and as we talked about in the last episode, it's building its memory, it's machine learning. And so it's going to remember your conversations. So because I've been using it with Tim's blog and to summarize our podcast, it has everything that we've talked about as a context. And I've gone as far as having different accounts for my hobbies of creativity and art and what I do with the church, because I was asking it for ideas of things to paint and it was giving me biblical references to go along with those paintings, which is all fine and wonderful, but wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and it was starting to get confusing. So that's what I mean by it remembers.
And again, along the line I've been talking about, talk to it like you want your response. Once your response is written, Sarah's already said she uses please and thank you, and it does too.
Yeah.
You ready to talk about some ways to use ChatGPT in ministry?
Yes. What's the first one?
Well, the first one we've already demonstrated. It's a idea generation and brainstorming partner. So I'm asking it. I'm working on a sermon series on discipleship. Can you suggest 7 to 10 topics for a United Methodist Church in Columbus? This congregation is an educated, diverse group of people, and I'm a veteran pastor with 50 years experience and a seminary education.
Yeah, and what I like about using ChatGPT in this way is it helps me have a thinking partner. I don't always have someone around that I can brainstorm with, and if I did, I'd probably ask them. But it gets ideas generated, and sometimes they're good and sometimes they're not so great, but they always help me to brainstorm. And I either read it and say, no, that's not what I was thinking at all. I want something that will help people go deeper into their journey of following Jesus. That's an introductory plan. So what just happened with that, even though it didn't give me the information I wanted, I was then better able to articulate what I was trying to focus on. And so it helped me to clarify my focus.
And so, Sarah, I want to add here something that we'll say over and over, and we talked about it the last episode, and that is you may be asking it for sermon ideas, but you're the one writing the sermon.
Right.
Not AI.
Right. And so what it generated for us was discipleship across the lifespan was one of my suggestions from ChatGPT, and it said, consider how discipleship evolves at different life stages from youth to older adulthood and how the church can support this lifelong journey. So now what's my task? To unpack that and to name that, and I could continue having a conversation with ChatGPT about that, but it's not going to write your sermon for you in the way that you're going to write it.
So another way to use ChatGPT is to formulate questions. So Sarah's already said she puts a blog post in for Christmas, ask for 5 to 7 reflection questions. So one of the things that came out was understanding the birth of Jesus. How does rethinking the birth of Jesus challenge and enrich your understanding of what it means to be a Christ-centered leader? That sounds just like something I would have said or written.
Yeah. So if you are putting together a Bible study and you have the content of that Bible study all mapped out, and you're like, okay, what are some discussion questions that people might pair off and have a conversation about? You could put that content in and then ask it to help you brainstorm some questions. And we'll say this probably multiple times. I always ask it for more than I need, because then I can pick and choose or combine things or just ignore some of it. So what I appreciate that you did there, Tim, is you took what it had offered and you evaluated, is this in my voice, and is this how I would say it? You used the content to create something for yourself.
So another thing this does, Sarah, and we've talked about this before, is that it actually it can help with clarity, but it actually helps with affirmation. That you know then that you may be communicating clearly. If it doesn't sound like your voice, maybe there's some other questions to ask or to have it become more clear.
Right. And you're leading us into our third way to use ChatGPT. It's to test the clarity of your communication. So put what you've written into ChatGPT and ask it to offer a bullet point summary of what you have written. It might be a sermon, it might be an email, it might be a newsletter article that's going out on your church email, whatever it is. If the summary is off, ask it to help you clarify the message that you were intending. Can you give me 3 suggestions to clarify a message about, or to focus this message about? So what you were pointing to, Tim, it can be a great check.
And Sarah, I've said this before on previous episodes. I wish I had this when I was starting in ministry. I think it's very helpful for us, those of us who are in ministry. I see the positives of this.
You know what I think about? I think about when I was preaching weekly, because I wrote manuscripts. And so if I was preaching weekly, to be able to copy and paste that manuscript into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize it for me, just to make sure the message that I have prepared is what is being communicated. Yes, there's still the delivery, but at least what is written is what you are intending to do. And we'll get to some other ways in just a minute that might be helpful in sermon preparation and communication throughout the week.
So you ready for the next one, number 4?
Yep.
Use it to draft your social media post. Again, you can use the content from your sermon or Bible study and ask it to draft the posts that you want. I mean, you can be specific in the number of posts you want, what you want from AI, and whether it includes hashtags. I mean, how cool is that? You're putting it all together. It's going to condense it down, let you put a post out, and you can even put hashtags with it.
So here's part of what I've learned about social media, and this goes to your point, Tim, of be more specific. If I just ask it for general social media posts, it gives me general social media posts. So for our last episode, I put in, can you offer 10 social media posts that offer and include a hook, insight, and call to action, a picture suggestion, and hashtags for each social media post. And so its first example was, is AI the new frontier for your ministry? Discover how AI can revolutionize your church's outreach and efficiency. From Siri to ChatGPT, the future is here. Listen to episode 305 for AI insights. Hashtag ChurchCheck AI in Ministry podcast. Picture suggestion, a pastor looking at a computer screen displaying AI technology. And it gave me 9 more suggestions of what will happen. Now, I'm not going to use all 10 of those, but they're a place to bounce off of.
But part of what you're saying, Sarah, is one of the things that I've learned about ministry in the 21st century, and that is using technology as a way of being an assistant allows you to have conversation. And I'm going to say this because I want to be careful the way I say it. It really helps with isolation or not being so isolated, because even though it's with technology, your conversation, you're actually being challenged to think and discern, and you're actually being challenged to think strategically as well as biblically and theologically, because the technology can't do any more than you give it.
Yes.
It may help you. It may help you organize it. It may help you be able to communicate it, but it can't give you any more than what you've put into it.
I'll say again what you said. Garbage in is garbage out. Why don't you move us on to the next one?
Okay. Another way to use ChatGPT is in planning. You outline a plan, drop it into ChatGPT, and ask it what else you need to consider. You might ask it to estimate the amount of time it'll take. You can test it on cost. And just know that it sometimes, as Sarah's been telling us, hallucinates, and you'll need to check all those things with reality. This is where you have to be healthy, and this is where you have to know your subject, because you could sound pretty foolish if you just used everything it gave back to you.
Right. It does hallucinate. I haven't experienced anything bad at this point, but it's certainly, probably the worst was the example that we gave of it generating a person with 3 legs, which was just weird more than bad. So I touched on this one a little bit a few minutes ago, but this is specifically for sermons. Put the text of your sermon into ChatGPT and ask it to summarize your sermon in less than 100 words. If the message isn't what you were planning on preaching, you have work to do in clarifying your message. Then ask it to help you write 5 to 7 reflection questions to share with the congregation. Put them in the bulletin on Sunday or send them as a follow-up email on Monday morning so people can continue living out the message that they heard. Another way that it can help is, and this is something that I am terrible with titles, ask it to help you generate ideas for titles. Once you input the text, ask it to generate 5 to 7 ideas for titles based on the sermon that you shared. And then you now have 7 different ideas. And usually what I end up doing is I take a piece from one and a piece from another and then a third part from something, and I have my title. And so at least something to play with.
And then another way this can help you is that you can create templates for newsletters and emails. You provide the parameters of what you want. You ask it to help you draft a template. And then each month you have a starting place to work from.
Yeah. So because we were talking today about using ChatGPT in pastoral ministry to become more efficient, I asked ChatGPT that very question. And this is a great example of where discernment is needed, because there are a couple of things on the list that I'm not even going to share with you that I said, there's no way, not going here, wouldn't use it. A couple of the ideas, it confirmed what we have already said. The one that I thought was interesting, and this would be super helpful for congregations that are multilingual, is language translation. AI can provide real-time translation. You may have used that on Zoom before, but to make it accessible for everyone, that could be a helpful way to use it.
Well, as you put the information in, it gave it back. And again, it's based upon what we've put into it or what you've put into it. One of them I thought was good was community engagement analysis. AI can help understand community needs and trends, and then it helps you become more effective in outreach and missional work. So the 7 missional questions, you've getting the assets, you're getting the needs, you're feeding ChatGPT the information, and it gives you some ways in which you can respond.
Yeah, and part of what I appreciate about that is because it is analyzing data, it removes the emotional attachment that we sometimes have to the data that we are receiving, and it simply gives you data in an objective way of what has been offered. And I put in a prompt. I don't think I included it in this conversation because of what we talked about last episode about telling the future. I asked it to project the future of ministry in Westerville, Ohio. It was a little bit more specific than that. And it came back and said, I can't do that. But what it did tell me then were some steps to take. And guess what it reflected? There's no surprise. The 7 missional questions. And the most important one on there was connect with people. And the reason why it couldn't do that was it doesn't have real-time data. It's not based on, it doesn't have the current activity of what is happening in Westerville, Ohio. My guess is over the course of time, that will be something that will change with AI, and it will become more real-time based. But right now it's not.
Sarah, another one that was on the list that might be helpful, because I'm going to be a little snarky here and say this is where we usually start and not with mission, is financial management and stewardship. And you could use the tool to assist in budgeting, financial planning, stewardship campaigns, how you can be more efficient with the use of resources. It's helpful. I mean, it's another place that offers you a way to move forward. And
this is probably obvious. All I'm going to remind folks at that point is Just don't put in bank information into ChatGPT.
Yeah, right.
Just a reminder.
So, Sarah, it's helpful in reminding us what we don't always want to hear. People are still the most important part of what we do.
Absolutely. Relationships are essential to everything that we do in ministry, and ChatGPT can't do that. It just might help you do a few administrative things a whole lot quicker. One other thought that I almost forgot about, there are templates inside ChatGPT. Use the templates that it offers to explore and discern. And please, for the love of God, read and discern and then edit what it shares with you to make it your own.
Yeah, thanks. I think that as you make that reminder, again, this is where it requires anyone using ChatGPT for sermon ideas, preparation, when you're going to use it as a template for newsletters, emails. It does not know how healthy or unhealthy you are. And using technology, social media particularly, but here's another place, almost demands a healthiness of the user. And all you have to do is read some of the posts we have on social media to see that some of us aren't very healthy. And AI and the use of ChatGPT will show you how unhealthy you are if you don't use discernment. So that's just a caution to keep yourself healthy. This is not a place where you can just be lazy and just let things fly by. This is an assistant that allows you to be even more who you can be. It doesn't take over for you. You still have to be who you are.
Right.
Is that the right way to say that, Sarah?
It's a wonderful way to say it. And you've heard us use the word discernment over and over and over again. I think it's an important word to keep at the forefront of AI and using ChatGPT. So thanks for making that the focus at the end of this podcast. As a reminder, you can find show notes at transformingmission.org/podcast, and you're looking for episode 306. We'll outline accessing ChatGPT on the show notes page. And remember, who you are is how you lead. Bye for now.